it's Ashton with Oakland Roots, and today we're going to be talking about houseplants. I don't know about you, but after I take down my Christmas decorations, I never really know what to decorate for. I love to decorate my house with flowers and bright colors, but it just doesn't quite feel right in January. So this year I went a little crazy getting some green to go around the house, and part of my reasoning behind this was that I do not have a lot of experience with houseplants. I just haven't grown them very often. So we went to our wholesaler and filled a few orders, and while I was there I got several for ourselves as well, and they have them in these little 3-inch containers which are perfect for testing them out, and I will probably put several different types of plants in the same container. That way it saves a little bit on space and pots, and that way I can kind of test them out and let you guys know what works, what didn't work for me, how easy they are to grow, and so forth. So the first thing I'm going to do is talk about each one of these varieties, and then I will walk you through the care that I've researched. Again, I don't have experience with very many of these, but I will walk you through what I have seen, and then we will also put together several different arrangements with these houseplants as well as some succulents. The first important thing about houseplants is how to water them, and this is one of the most common mistakes because outside they're out in the heat and you want to constantly keep the soil moist, and so you're watering nearly every day, maybe every other day in your pots. Houseplants, on the other hand, do not have that heat, and they prefer a little drier soil for the most part. So one of the biggest mistakes that people make is overwatering, and that includes myself. I will be watering my plants consistently, and then I can't figure out why they look so bad, and then you feel the soil and it's just so soggy almost. So the first thing for each of these varieties, it's pretty similar as far as your watering schedule. You will want to make sure that the soil dries out in between waterings. So that means that if you stick your finger down 2 to 4 inches into the soil, it needs to feel dry before you water it again. And then when you do go to water, you want to thoroughly moisten the soil. That way it is running out the bottom, and then again, wait for the soil to dry out before your next watering. So this could be every week, it could be every 2 weeks. It kind of depends on your situation. Like for us, we have a wood fireplace, so that tends to dry the air out a little more, so they might get dried out faster. But other plants you might only have to water every 2 to 3 weeks at the minimum. Another thing is during the spring and summer, you will need to water more often than you will in the fall and winter, because that is when the plants will be actively growing. So for each of these plants, the watering schedule is going to be about the same, which is really good for combining them into pots. That helps. For instance, if you put a plant that prefers dry soil with a plant that prefers consistently moist soil, one of those plants is not going to do well because you're not going to be giving it the most efficient water that it needs. So next I will talk about each one of these individually. The first plants that we have here are spider plants or airplane plants. And these quickly became some of my favorites last year. I actually got a tiny little cutting from Missouri State University last spring, and this is that plant now. I mean, it is huge, it is low maintenance, it is really pretty. You can put it in the summer, you can put this in the center as a centerpiece in a pot and then bring it back in the fall. It is just so easy. My mom actually brought hers in this winter and stuck it in her garage away from any windows. It's pretty cool in her garage, and it has done great. I mean, she just keeps it watered every once in a while. So this is a great plant for low light conditions. It'll do well in a window. I have heard that if plants are variegated, they need more sunlight to keep that color and keep the striping on them. So these two might require more sunlight than my solid green spider plant would. It is recommended that you water these once a week and less in the winter because they are not actively growing, and that you fertilize every 2 to 3 weeks. And the way you would fertilize these depends on your type of fertilizer. I have this indoor plant food, and all this is, you just put put a squirt in the pot. But there are also some that are water soluble, and you would just mix those into a pitcher and then water it like you normally would, and that would be your feeding for the week. Another cool thing about these spider plants is that they will have these baby spiders come off of them, and you can actually snip this off and stick this in a pot and it will root and become another plant. So that is, I mean, this one you can see is just loaded with these little baby spiders, and they are so easy. This is actually what my other spider plant started as. It was this small. The next plant we have is another very low maintenance plant, and that is a snake plant. We have two different colors here. One has a little bit of a variegated edge and the other is just solid green. And these are very easy. They prefer medium light, so that is about 10 feet from a south or west facing window. They can be grown in low light or bright light as well, but if they're in brighter light, they will grow faster, and if they're in lower light, they will grow slower. So if you have it in a small pot, you might want to bring it a little further away from the window, or if you have a really small plant that you want to get really big, I would suggest putting it in front of the window. These also like for their soil to dry out, so it is recommended that you only water these every 2 to 8 weeks. Now if they are in a pot with other varieties that you're watering every few weeks, then I think that would be fine. You just want to make sure that the soil is completely drying out before you water each time. This next plant we have is a baby rubber plant, and for these, if they have solid leaves, they will do fine in low light conditions, but in this case with the variegation, you want to have it in a little brighter location next to a window, and the watering is the same for these. Just let the soil dry out and then water it completely. The next plant we have allows you to have a little color without having the blooms, and that is a Croton, and there are several different types of this. You can see this one is a little more, it's got the red and yellow, but it's a little more speckled, whereas this one has the same colors, but it's bigger splotches of color. And then we also have this one that is just green and yellow speckled with a little different shaped leaf. We also bought one with bigger leaves that were more round, and that one we have already sold, but it's the same principle, same coloring, just bigger leaves, and I think it's a little more showy, where these are really pretty tucked in with other plants. For the Crotons, they prefer bright light, so you want a west, south, or east facing window. And they also prefer a humid environment, and if your humidity is not high enough, there's two different things you can do. You can take a tray of rocks and keep those wet and just set the pot on top of that tray, or you can mist their leaves with water once a week to keep that humidity up. Other than that, the watering is the same as the other plants, and they recommend that you fertilize only during the spring and summer. We have two different types of Dieffenbachia. The first one is has the variegated leaves, but it's more it's just different shades of green, so it's less bold, but it's a much bigger plant. And then the other one we have has the green and white leaves. These, again, like the high humidity, so you can do either the gravel or the misting of the leaves. Let the top 2 inches of the soil dry out in between waterings, but when they are actively growing, it is recommended that you water twice a week just to stimulate that growth and make sure they're getting everything they need. And it is also recommended that you fertilize every 4 to 6 weeks. There are several different types of Dracaena, and you've probably seen this outside in the summer in the center of geraniums. It's also known as a spike plant, and it is very common outside, but there are also several varieties that are really good in the house. These look more like the spike plant, and they have a little bit of a red tip on the ends, and then some of them will also have a little bit of a white stripe in there. And then there's also this one that is the same plant, it just looks completely different. And again, I had one that I sold that was a thick, grassy, a little thicker than these leaves. that had a dark green and a lime green striping to it. So there's several different types of these, but again, they are supposed to be very easy to take care of. They want the top 4 inches of soil to dry out before you water them each time. They do need to be fertilized every 4 weeks while they're growing. And these particular varieties prefer bright light from the window. There are several that do okay in low light conditions, but just make sure based on which type you get, you look up the light conditions for each one. And like the previous 2 plants, these prefer a humid environment, and luckily I am actually putting these all in the same pot together, so then I will be able to put the wet gravel underneath or just keep their leaves misted. It's a good idea for houseplants to mist their leaves every once in a while anyway, because dust will collect really bad on these. The next one we have is English ivy, which again, this one you'll see a lot of times outside, and it prefers the bright light from the window, and it needs to be fertilized 1 time a month in the spring, summer, and fall. And it wants to dry out between waterings. But look how amazing this plant is. I mean, this is a tiny little container, and it is just so big and vining already. I cannot wait to get this in a bigger pot and see what it can do. I think this would be really pretty on a shelf trailing over the side, or in a windowsill, or anything like that. The next one we have is a Schefflera, or an umbrella plant, and for these they do prefer the bright light and they want to dry out between waterings, but you want to go easy on the water in the winter when they are not growing. However, in the spring, when they are starting to put on growth, they are heavy feeders. So it is recommended that you fertilize these 2 times a week, which is a lot compared to the others that require once a month. But if you have the pump plant food, then if these are in an arrangement, you can just pump that right at the root ball so that you're not hitting all of the plants in that pot, but you are giving it a little bit of food for growth. The last one we have is a Philodendron, and this one will be vining, so it will vine out. They are slow growers, so it might take a long time to see those. I'm sure you've seen pictures of the Philodendrons that vine almost throughout the whole house, but they are recommended to have indirect light, but I know that these will do pretty good without a window close by, so they would be a good option, like your spider plants and your snake plants, for low light conditions. It's recommended that you fertilize once a week in the spring and summer, and then every 6 to 8 weeks in the winter. So these are the ones that you do want to continue to fertilize even when they are not in the growing season. And like the others, they prefer to let the soil dry out in between. I have one more plant to show you that I did not purchase, but it is another cutting that I took last year, and I just want to show you what you can do with those. This is a type of wandering Jew, and again, I mean, I had a cutting that was probably from where my hand is to the tip with that many leaves on it, and we just stuck those in cells, and I do believe we used rooting hormone on these, but they just took off, and this is such a pretty plant, and it's still growing so well. And most of these houseplants, you do want to look up whether they are patented, but if they don't come with a tag, they are likely not going to be a patented variety. However, for the most part, houseplants are very easy to propagate. So if you have a piece that falls off, as long as it doesn't fall off from disease, or if you have it in an arrangement and it gets way too big, you can just cut these back and stick them in the dirt, and then you will have a bunch more plants. It's the same way with succulents. So that's another good thing about houseplants, is that you can always be creating more for your house, or if you want to give some to a friend. This wandering Jew is really pretty because the back side of the leaves are purple. I don't know if you can see that, but they are really bright purple, and I think the more light it is in, the brighter that coloring will be. But I just wanted to show you in 1 year's time what a plant can do. Now that I have shown you all of these, we will be potting them up. So I will show you, some of them will be going in arrangements with 2 or 3 plants per pot, and then others will just be going in a pot by themselves. Let's get started. One thing that I like to do with houseplants is to find whatever pots make them unique. You can use coffee cups for the succulents. You can do different things like that. The first thing that it is important to make sure of though for houseplants is that they do have draining holes. And if they do not, you can just take your drill and drill a few in there depending on the size. I usually use like a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch drill bit to drill mine because all houseplants do need really good drainage. And that comes to our next point, that it is important to use an indoor potting mix, and this is because it will help with drainage. It'll help the water flow through it a little easier than your typical potting soil mix. It might help retain that moisture so that the plants stay more consistently moist. So this first one I'm going to do, I have the 2 different types of Dracaena. I have an ivy, a Dieffenbachia, and a Croton. So one suggestion when you're planting a pot is that on the ones on the sides that you angle the roots out. That way the plant fills out from the side and you're seeing more of the top and less of the bottom of the plant. And there's one plant done. If you like for the ivy to be a little thicker in the center here, you can snip these off, and again you can propagate them, or you can just throw them out if you don't want any more, but that helps this plant be a little more full in the center and not have all of these wild pieces hanging out. I kind of like the wild look, but that's just personal preference. So the last thing I'm going to do is water this in. And I'm going to get a tray to put underneath it. That way I can water until the water's coming out the bottom, and then for today I will empty that tray so that they're not sitting in the water, and then I will go from there. And some of these may hold a lot of water to begin with, just because the soil is very dry and it has just been potted. So to start off, they're gonna really soak up that moisture, and then after this you won't have to put near as much water on for each watering. So there is some water coming out of the bottom, so we're going to call it good on that one. One pot down, lots more to go. For this pot we will be planting the snake plant, the umbrella plant, a Croton, and the baby rubber plant. Typically I would want something kind of, for a pot this big, I would want something spilling out the front, but I want to save my philodendron for a low light location. So I will just be using these. And these, one thing is, a lot of these plants grow really fast. So they will not be able to stay in this container forever, but this is a good way to start them off, test them out, and then whatever's growing really good, we can transplant into another pot and fill in with something else later on. This snake plant is like busting at the seams with its roots, so I'm anxious to see what is underneath. You can see on this one that there are 2 or 3 really large root systems with these smaller roots coming off the back, and this is what the spider plant will do as well, and it is really neat to see those huge roots that form off of your cuttings. And for right now I am making this the back of the pot because the snake plants, for the most part, the tallest, with these 2 about the same size, and then the baby rubber plant is very short in the front. However, these 2 I know grow pretty fast and they get pretty big, so eventually I might turn this to where these 2 are in the front. That's the fun part about plants. I mean, this pot you could turn in any direction and it would be fine. So it's based on what you like, where you're planning on putting it, and what you want to do. For the philodendron, I am going to put him in a pot by himself because I know it will get pretty large, and you could start off with another low light plant such as a snake plant or a spider plant, but for now I just have a small clay pot that I'm going to put it in. If you want to use the clay saucers in the house, you will want to get ones that are glazed on top, or glaze them yourselves. That way the water does not seep through and get on whatever you have the pot sitting on. This one is also going on the top of my mantle, so I don't really care what the backside looks like because nobody's going to be able to see that. So I am going to put the plant towards the front of the pot and angled out. That way as it vines out, it'll be more visible. The last one I'm going to pot up today is the larger Dieffenbachia, and again, I'm going to put it in its own pot because I think it will grow pretty fast and it's already really big. I don't want it to, the canopy to overshadow the other plants to where you can't see them. And another thing, you might need to add more soil after you water it down, because a lot of times that moisture, it'll suck it in and suck it down towards the bottom of the pot, and then your roots aren't covered all the way. So that is it for the house plants, and now let's get started on the succulents. Next, we're going to start with our succulents, and I don't know a ton about succulents, so I don't know the different varieties, and these did not come with tags. But if you see anything you like, maybe screenshot it and send it to us, and I'm sure we can get something very similar, if not the exact same thing. I do know that this one is a calancho, and this one will bloom really pretty, and then the rest of these are just some variety succulent. They come in 4-inch or the 2-inch, and basically the same plant in each one. This one's just going to be a little bigger, so if you want to make an arrangement in a pot and already want the height, you can use this, or some of these will get to be this size anyway, so if you are a little more patient, you can buy these at a lower price, or you can buy the big ones to start off with. The first thing, this pot we found, and I did drill holes in the bottom because it was not meant to be a planter to start off with, and I just did 3 across. If it's a smaller pot, you can do 1. Some larger pots need 4, so it just kind of depends. As long as there's a place for the water to get out, you should be fine. And then for cactus and succulents, you do want to use a cactus potting mix. It's a little more sandy, and it helps to drain out, because succulents do not want to be overwatered. That is very important with them. So this soil will help that out a little bit. And with succulents, you can pack them in really tight in the pot because they are very slow growers, and that arrangement would last probably a year. For me, I am going to space them out a little bit because I have more pots than I have succulents to really cram them in. But like, you could put one here, you could fill this up to where you couldn't even see the dirt below. That's just personal preference. If you want this to last a really long time, you want to space them out a little bit. And I'm wanting mine to grow a little fast so that I can propagate. So for me, I am going to space them out a little bit. One thing with succulents you want to do, if you lose any leaves, because they can be kind of delicate, but if you lose these leaves, don't throw them away. If you lay these out and dry them, you can just set them in the soil and they will grow their own plant. I will actually be doing a video on that within the next couple of days as well, because in the transport we lost several leaves, so I will be growing several new plants from those. So don't trash those if you want any more. If you don't want any more plants, you can just pitch them. It won't hurt the plant any to have those have fallen off. Another thing I will be posting a video of is this one in the back got really top heavy, and one thing you can do is you can just cut the top off of him to make just a small succulent, and then take each one of these leaves off the base, plant this one, plant each of the leaves, and then also a new plant will come from the stem. So I mean, there's so much potential for new plants from each of these succulents. They are very easy to propagate, and that's something I'm really looking forward to. This one here that is kind of crawling out the side, these are all little buds, so it is getting ready to bloom, and I can't wait to see what that will look like. And again, I'm just going through and picking out some of the leaves that fell off while we were planting. Okay, and there is our first pot, and I did this one to where you could look at it from any side. I will probably put this on a table in our front entrance. Then the last thing you need to do with succulents is to water them down until the water runs through, and then do not water them until they were completely dried out. Another trick I have heard of is to put a couple ice cubes in there, and that way they slowly water, and they keep those roots moist but not too wet. You can tell on succulents they will start to slightly shrivel when they get too dry, so that's a good indicator as well. If you wait until they start to look a little wrinkled, then that's a good time to water. This next one we are doing will be pretty straightforward. I found this little tin pot and it did not have a hole, so I drilled a hole, and this is going to be about the exact size of this one. And this succulent is very unique. It's got that pinkish red color and the edges are prickly. They're not thorns, but they're very prickly, and this one would be pretty in the center of other succulents to create contrast, but I thought as flat as it would be really pretty by itself in a pot too. And when you're not moving up in size in a pot, you're just changing it out, it does not require very much of the soil. And you will notice that I personally do not plant cactuses. I like the look of them, but for doing these kind of arrangements and for potting and repotting at the greenhouse, we do. I am not willing to take the risk of poking myself all the time on the thorns. This next planter will be packed a little tighter than the last one just because I was needing to find a place for him, and this one is huge, but he would be very easy to trim back. I mean, it would just take a few snips, and then again you can plant each of the pieces that you're cutting off and grow new plants as well. So this is the exact same pot as the first one I did, but I thought they would be cute in two different rooms of our house. And with most of these, as delicate as they are, the easiest thing to do is to just kind of press them into the soil and then take your bag of soil and fill in around the edges. This next arrangement will have this in the back as a little bit of height, and then we have this Schefflera which is blooming, and it has got such bright, pretty orange blooms. And then we have another Schefflera with a little bit of a red tinge to it, and then we have this beautiful spiky succulent. I am going to put one of each of these on the side, and right now it won't look very symmetrical just because this one has this height, but this one will eventually bloom too, and then when this bloom dies back, we'll snip this off. So they will go back to looking symmetrical. Another trick with succulents, like this where they've been packed in there and you had to pour in dirt afterwards, is to take a paintbrush or a makeup brush and just brush the dirt off, and that kind of helps clean it up, but it's still delicate enough that you're not breaking off any pieces of the succulent. Another pot done. This next pot we're going to plant has grow embossed on the front, and I absolutely love the two-tone tin like this one is, and I am all about like the rustic type look, so this is right up my alley. For this one, we have a smaller version of the centerpiece succulent we've been using, and then we also have two different types of Schefflera. This one I really like because it kind of looks like lettuce almost. It's got a different style of leaf, and it's almost ruffled. For these succulent pots as well, you want to get the soil pretty close to the top because they grow more out than they do up. So in order to be able to see this plant over the top, you're going to want your soil pretty level with the surface. And again with this one, we could get probably 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 more this size in this pot, but I am wanting them to grow out a little more so that I can take cuttings off of them and propagate, so I'm going to give them a little more room for the roots to grow. Last succulent that I have, I will actually not be planting today because I still need to drill a hole in the bottom of this cup. But we got these cute little coffee mugs that say life is beautiful, and they have really pretty spring type flowers. And I am going to use a diamond drill bit to drill a hole in the bottom of this one, and then I will be planting this single succulent in it as well. I wanted to show you this succulent arrangement because this is another option that you can do. This is actually a kalanchoe that is in full bloom, and it is beautiful. But you can see, if you look up close here, you can see the gravel on the top. A lot of people with houseplants and succulents both will put a fine layer of gravel or moss on top of the plants. That just covers the dirt and makes it look a little nicer. I wouldn't suggest doing that until you get comfortable with your watering and you know that your plant's established, because it's a little harder to peel the moss up and dig around and see how moist the soil still is. So once you get pretty confident in your watering routine and you know that the plants are doing well with the water you're giving them, it looks really pretty to add a little moss or gravel on top, and just it looks a little more finished. These arrangements we get from our wholesaler, and they are so cute. Everyone is a little different, and if you would like these are available at the greenhouse. I really hope you enjoyed watching today, and I hope you learned a little bit about taking care of houseplants and how to pot them in arrangement. I am not the greatest at putting arrangements together. I don't necessarily get them as full as a lot of people do, but part of that is because I know I get busy, and if I get them full from the start, when it's time to transplant, I'm going to run out of time and then the plants will suffer. So I would rather get them in the pot where they can stay for the longest amount of time from the beginning and save me a little time in the long run. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you learned a lot. If you have any questions about houseplants, shoot us a message or comment below, and let us know if there are any other types of videos you would like to see. Also, if you would like one of these arrangements, we can put that together for you and sell it at our greenhouse at Oakland Roots. So just let us know what you think, and thank you for joining us today. We will see you in the next one. Bye.